Testing, testing. We should be live on YouTube and Twitter. Welcome back to the Prospero.ai stock market live stream, everyone. Everybody who's in here early, be sure to like up the stream. We missed Monday, but we are back. Today is Wednesday, February 19th. It is 3 p.m. and the stock market across the board is green today. We have the QQQ up 0.2%, the S&P up 0.25%, Dow Jones just above the flat line, up 0.01% at this very moment. And then the IWM, the only one that is red on the day so far. We have a bunch of great stories to get into today as we missed Monday, so we have a bit of catching up to do, but we're going to start off with the performance that Prospero signals have delivered so far this year for everybody who gets the investing and trading letters. We just crossed the 200% above annualized point, above the SPY for our investing letter today. And I believe it was thanks to SMCI, which the stream actually pointed out to us, the fact that the signals were looking better. So George is going to get in here and talk about that. And then after, we have a bunch of individual stock stories to cover. We're going to talk about Hims and Hers, which is a stock that has just gone up and up and up so far this year, pressing up on being up almost 200% year to date, and it's only February 19th. And since I last checked, it might have even done that. But they announced some news today about a company they acquired and some new features they're going to be able to do because of that acquisition. So we'll talk about Hims and Hers stock, and if you haven't invested in it, is it still interesting to take a look at now? Then we have solar stocks kind of coming back. One of them entered into our short-term bull list in our app. That would be First Solar, or FSLR is the ticker. So Solar Edge reported today and went up 26% on their earnings report. And our signals are now detecting very strong bullish bets in FSLR. So is the beaten down solar sector something that investors should take a look at as for more big moves going forward, something that maybe have been beaten down too much? And in a similar vein as that, Intel reported that their business is being looked at by Taiwan Semi, Broadcom, Qualcomm for different segments of their business that they could possibly spin off, and it sent the shares higher. And Intel has just done almost nothing right for the past however long you want to look at it, months, years, decades. Intel stock has kind of just not been able to keep up with the other leading semiconductor companies in the space. But is this does this exemplify the fact that a lot of people say sometimes businesses, the sum of the parts is more valuable than the whole? Is this a perfect example? Then we have a story about SoundHound AI. So if you're someone that didn't like our coverage of it when we posted some of those shorts videos from about a year ago saying that it wasn't the correct time to buy SoundHound, there's a pretty, I would say, maybe slightly negative update for them. Hello, George. Welcome to the stream. So we'll let you know what that is when we get to it later on. Stick around for that. And then we're going to highlight the Coinbase earnings, since it's a stock we've talked about so much on recent streams, and the lackluster results from them in terms of stock performance, and spinning that into Square, which is something, if you're a usual viewer of the streams, we kind of highlighted it a few weeks back, and we're going to take another look at it now that we've gotten the Coinbase report. And then we're going to end off with two stories about different product updates from Apple and Amazon. Apple's was a new, cheaper version of their iPhone. So I'll give you the details on what that costs later on. But what does that say about the state of the consumer, or even the state of Apple, that they have to cheapen their product? And then Microsoft unveiling their first quantum computing chip. So it looks like the quantum computing era is upon us. Conversely to what Jensen Huang said just a few short weeks or months ago about it being decades away. But let's take a look at the Prospero net option sentiment for QQQ and SPY at the start of the stream today, so we can compare them when we look at them later on during the model portfolio. So we have the QQQ at 36 right now, and we have the SPY at 20. So the QQQ back above the SPY in net option sentiment level. We have most of the markets behaving well, going green today, George. I checked earlier at our performance for the model portfolio, and I believe we crossed the 200% mark, which is just pretty insane performance so far in 2025. How have you been able to do so well this year?
For the investing moves, the model portfolio is different. But yeah, it's been really good. I mean, I think it's our, it's the same strategy that works for us. It's just a question of like what our winners are, right? We go for big, high potential winners, and we hedge that with our shorts. And this year, I mean, it's been, we've had AppLovin really go off. We had ASTS like a few times. Now SMCI, an old favorite, is back. And I have to ask, thank anyone in the audience. If you're here, I know maybe a few different people, or maybe it was one, brought up SMCI. But, we're always listening. And even though we didn't add it at that time, I've had my eye on it. And actually tomorrow there's a pretty interesting graph where it really highlights how our signals identified it coming back this latest time. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of what we always do. I think what's really interesting is how our process is involved. And I think especially last year and this year, since we've been using that same bull and bear filter, we used to do different ones in different weeks depending on it. But now that we've just settled into that, I think that's been really helpful, because looking at that every week, I noticed that AppLovin is the other one that I looked at the historical relationship for, and it really wasn't, we got interested. I could probably actually show, I'll show these graphs on it, because it's super cool. And maybe they could be, shorts or whatever. But I'll do that when I get to the lab. And I think what was interesting is AppLovin in particular, we added it when it got to like 90 upside, 90 net option sentiment. And that was, before it like had its big jump. We kind of caught it, its first big jump, I should say. We caught it in that zone. So I think it's just, really being able to look at that bull screener every week. And it's kind of what we tell anyone about the Prospero signals, right? We have access to different kinds of data than everybody else has and aggregate it. So you can't necessarily do the same aggregations as us. Although you do get to see a lot of them in the letters. And, there's just things that stand out. If you're looking at the same report every week, right? And you see something like AppLovin in the top 3 at 37 billion market cap, that really stood out, right? When you see, some of the other, when you see SMCI coming back, I believe it was ranked 16 on that filter this week, on that bull screener, after, being in the, I remember seeing it go down, below like 1,000, like, which is like the 50% level. So, you see it come up, you see it on the screener when it had been off, kind of peaking in momentum score, that kind of thing. Like when you're looking at the same numbers every day and what comes in and out is notable, that's really what we're doing. And it works. I hope it's working as well for everybody else as it's working for us, because if it was just working for us, that wouldn't be as good, or what our goal is.
SMCI has been absolutely insane watching that stock, and a company that I probably never would have even heard of until it had its move, had I not been on these Prospero live streams and paying attention to the signals. And now again, the fact that it went all the way down and it was in the doghouse for so long, like almost a year, and exactly at the point before it turns around and makes its rally, we'll see where it goes from here now, but the signals highlight again. It's a pretty epic, I feel like, example of how useful the signals can be. And
yeah, and it kind of shows the difference between what our comfort zone is and perhaps what the max win is. And I use that, historically, like I tell a story about when we first came to ASTS, and Matt, who's the person, the primary writer on the newsletter now, was bugging me about ASTS for a month or two before I finally added it. And I was just kind of like, it's not in my signal zone yet. And it was the same thing. Like I was following the story of SMCI. The metrics were starting to improve, but they didn't get quite to the point where I was comfortable, where it could like make it on a bull screen or where it could make it into a higher momentum score. Those are the kinds of things that I look for, and I'm pretty fixed on it. But that's kind of the point where, the signals are not going to necessarily be on the ground floor of anything, because they need a critical mass of institutions, right? But where we kind of come in is, when it starts to get that kind of institutional attention relative to where it is. I think, that's really where we shine. And, most of the upside is still there. And the way that we look at it, most of the upside is still there on these names. And you're coming in at a much larger, much lower risk, because you're waiting to see it needs to get like a critical mass of institutions agreeing on it. And that's why I'm in, even though, there's this like looming accounting deadline. Just because, for me, I kind of see it like, okay, I just don't think it would get this kind of institutional buy-in if there wasn't a lot of confidence from people in the know that they were going to be able to file. And they said, they expected to be able to file. So, that to me is, it's a big downside event if they get delisted, obviously. And what I might, I don't know. What I might do is, probably maybe at the end of the week, I'll get rid of it. Just because if you're pushing up against that deadline, I'll have until Monday. But yeah, if you're pushing up against that deadline, that might make people nervous. So hopefully they just get it filed before the deadline and it takes off. That's what I'm hoping. But I'm gonna have a tough decision to make, and I'll have the signals help me when that happens. Because you could lose all, like right now I'm 60%. I think we're 60% up on the market, something like that. And if they get delisted, I'll probably lose that and more. So, it's always good to take your 60% win when you can. So I'm going to try to do that. But we'll see. It's kind of, I do think the probability of it winning a lot more is higher than the probability of it not. But there's also the risk of sell on the news, right? Maybe they do the filing and it goes down anyway, just because people were playing that event. So yeah, it's gonna be a tough one. I'll think on it more, but I'm definitely leaning towards selling probably Friday, maybe over the weekend. But I'll stay signal driven.
Something that I've seen people talking about is that a lot of retail stocks that retail is mostly interested in and has been pushing for a long time, have been doing well. And they were saying that retail is beating institutions to some of these names. For example, like Palantir, Robinhood is something they were mentioning. Hims and Hers is one that I'm going to bring up, and why I'm saying this at all. But do you think there's any truth to that point, that retail maybe, because of tools like Prospero, is more educated than ever and is able to find these companies before institutions are ready to take on that risk that these companies might offer?
I don't know if I'm ready to say retail is more educated than ever. There always seems to be a mix of, I definitely think the top end retail investors, that group is larger and they're increasing in intelligence. But I also think there's this huge population, not intelligence, like aptitude. But there's also a large, and I think things like AI tools make those people smarter. But there's a huge segment of people that are just like looking on social media and buying what people like. That group is also growing. And that group is very susceptible to spreading of false narratives, being tools of institutions, things like that, all the things that we warn against. But I believe it is 80% of funds now use social media data as an input. And that's what I always talk about. I've been saying this, that, it used to be that institutions led everything. But now not on every investment, but there's definitely some investments where retail leads institution, leads more retail, leads more institutional. And institutions are aware of that flow, right? It's all like we talk about this all the time. The market's much more momentum driven. Institutions don't mind playing the momentum because they have the high frequency traders that exit them on time. They have anything better than anyone else as a momentum trader. And they have a faster pipe to the internet, all that stuff. So yeah, they are the best people to get involved in those momentum trades. And yeah, if you see retail start to pick it up and you can get in just, above the ground floor, what you know about these trades is that if there's an initial swell of retail, right? That retail market is validated, right? They're going to tell all their friends. They probably had been telling all their friends. When it starts actually going up, then you have this other swell of people joining. So that's a tried and true thing. But what we warn against, right, is that you really have to watch out on those trades, how long they've been running, and the extent that those get away from, I think, traditional valuation metrics and also the business, right? I think that when you're looking at something like Palantir and they have like a macro political, thing that could really help them grow, they have, they have a real powerful business with high paying customers, right? To me, that's a little bit different than a SoundHound AI that is basically like, it's basically like a new age GPS, right? Where you're just like, there is something to that, right? But there's a certain valuation where it just becomes like an unreasonable multiple, and you don't want to get caught on the tail end of that, because just as institutions like to play those on the way up, we talk about it all the time. They love to get the attention and they love to, start buying put options, and then rug pull, short the stock, make a lot of money at the expense of retail investors getting in late. So I just warn, I think momentum's really good. I think, you can catch lightning in a bottle with those things, but you just have to be very cognizant of like, okay, am I late to this? What am I looking at to determine if I'm late? And what risk management practices am I putting in? Because, companies will stop loss hunt. You can put in a stop loss. You might end up losing it all if there's an event that has it losing, actually even below your stop loss level if the stock is moving quickly. But yeah, I think as long as you're asking that question, am I late? And you actually have a real way to validate that, and you're putting in some risk management practices, I say go for it if that's your wheelhouse. But I'd suggest to you that, you look for those stocks that have that kind of appeal, and then also look good in Prospero's key signals, like upside and net option sentiment. I caught, GameStop because it did have net option sentiment and upside breakout into that crypto announcement. So it's not as if, prioritizing Prospero signals will leave you out of those plays. There's plenty of those plays that we catch, not all of them, but, that's kind of always our motto. We'd rather catch the ones that look very strong in our signals because of the high hit rate of those. You might miss some opportunities, but in our view, you're missing opportunities that are riskier opportunities.
So you brought up SoundHound, so I wanted to bring up this story at some point on the live stream today about NVIDIA selling their entire stake in SoundHound, because that's something when we got a lot of our hate comments for SoundHound that people were saying that NVIDIA had an investment in the company. So what does that mean for SoundHound going forward? But also, could NVIDIA be doing this because they have a big profit, and does that help a company's EPS in a quarter if they sell something like that? How could that affect NVIDIA, the fact that they would sell it?
Yeah, that probably tells you that they think it got a little overpriced. But yeah, that's not really going to move the needle much for NVIDIA. I think all that is them saying they think it's too attractive of an investment. And it might be something where, I mean, it could be as simple as like the gain is there and they think it's overpriced and it's not really worth that and it's going to correct. Or they could know something else. I think that NVIDIA is a partner. They could think that like there's other products coming, other people they're thinking of working with that have a similar technology, maybe a different solution. Maybe it's not an in your car thing. Maybe it's more of a on your phone thing. Because if you think about it, like on your phone is a little bit, I've seen I saw their like little presentation at CES. And yeah, I think that it's just not necessarily like a technology that has staying power necessarily.
So
NVIDIA might be saying
that. Yeah. I don't want to skip over HIMS because I wanted to highlight them. They have earnings next week. They're a stock that's just gone bonkers recently, up about 20% today, 184% year to date, and over 600% in the past year. So when you have a stock that has made such a insane move like that, and you're a shareholder heading into earnings, how should you be feeling about the type of move that can happen post earnings for a company like that?
I mean, it's very sunny here. If you could look up the forward PE of HIMS, I'd be interested, because it's just really hard. Like that's like we wrote about like Kava recently, and it actually had a bit of it's been in a bit of a correction lately. But when you look at those businesses, it really is something that you don't really know what a fair valuation is, right? It gets all this momentum, just like what we're talking about. You get this momentum, and it's really hard to know what a fair valuation is because when they're getting, new approvals, perhaps selling units, things like that. Like when a business is improving, that's a bit hard to do from a valuation perspective, right? Because part of why HIMS is trading this way is they do keep making like structural improvements to widen their business. It's a growth area. Like I know what they do a lot is they get, they like circumvent the prescription system. That's like complicated, and they run like Facebook ads and they just make things easier. So, how much of a market that has, it's potentially huge, especially when you start putting more drugs on the platform and you go to your existing list and you're just saying like, here you go, you can do this in addition, that in addition. So I think that's what makes it very, very hard you're combining momentum with a legitimate speculation on how their business is going to grow. And what makes it very hard to say whether it's a good value is like if someone's assuming that they're going to be more improvements to the business that widen their customer base or improve monetization or new approvals, et cetera, right? All of that is very hard to know how much is built into the current price, right? Because you could be right. You could say, oh, I think they're going to add these new drugs, and I think they're, underrating the growth of the company, blah, 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 right? But when that actually happens, it could be turned out that like all of that was already priced in to what the market wanted. So that's what makes it very, very challenging. And yeah, we've seen I can't really read that. Can you read it to me?
2025, 112.5, and 2026, 81 forward PE estimates.
I mean, that's not as bad. I think Kava's actually higher. That's not as bad as I thought. So yeah, there's some room to build in how people forecast, businesses. But again, and I'm interested, I kind of want to check where it is in Prospero because I do know it's very high in momentum score right now, like for obvious reasons. 90 upside. Looks like there are a lot of institutions. Oh yeah, if you go into the like the net options graph, there's like a nice little upswing prior to prior to this recent move. But yeah, I mean, it's hard. I wouldn't add a stock like this to the high conviction portfolio just because it's too momentum based. I like to make sure I balance momentum and the core signals a little better, because even right now there's a net option sentiment of 68, but an upside of 90 is pretty good. It's that's nothing to scoff at.
So another sector I wanted to check in on, as there's been a lack of momentum, but maybe it's coming back, was solar. So there was a company, Solar Edge, that reported today, and the stock was up over 26%. And if you look at like a 5-year stock chart of that company, it's just been really bad for several years. But maybe up 26% today is a sign that this sector has been beaten down enough where it could come back. And then another company in that same space, FSLR, or First Solar, was on our short-term bull list this morning in Prospero. I think it had pretty strong signals. So how do you feel about that space going forward with that info?
Not good. It's kind of like when we talk about aligning, one of the things that we have, I think one of the best things that we have going for this market, right, is, there's a lot of there's a lot of unpredictability and volatility around the massive overhaul that everybody is seeing in government, right? But the other side of that is, Trump does telegraph what he wants to support and what he doesn't want to support, right? So for things like Coinbase that we say we're sticking in because he wants to support crypto, right? Or Tesla's adjacent Palantir we picked up for those very same reasons. Whatever the signals say, there's some other reason that aligns with that, but reinforces that gives us comfort in this market, right? I think solar is the opposite of that, right? He's got a real problem with renewables, or you could say he really likes traditional energy. Either one. I think it's actually more of the latter than the former, and there's just kind of fallout, and also the last administration was friendlier towards renewables. So there's some of that wear off, and then him kind of being into more let's call historically popular energy sources. So yeah, I just those stocks. 97 net option sentiment is interesting for First Solar, but it's got 53 upside, right? And I think that's in Solar Edge was 56 upside. It's not there. In general, those numbers aren't high enough for me. But even if the numbers were higher, I'd be worried about the macro picture. But it's one of those situations that we don't have to worry about that, right? Because a lot of the Trump picks that we like are that partially because they're very strong in the signals. And the signals also match up with this macro problem. All of the solar companies look better in the signals before this transfer of power.
So you mentioned Coinbase, and that's one of the stocks I wanted to bring up because they had earnings last week and a bit of a lackluster reaction from the stock. And being in the fintech crypto space, I wanted to bring up Square today as they have earnings tomorrow. And I remember a couple of weeks ago you said you like the name for your own inside reasons, maybe. So I wanted to check back in on Square after Coinbase kind of had a bit of a null earnings.
Yeah, the reason I like Square is for reasons outside of crypto. And actually, I would say that Coinbase had good earnings. They just, I think there was a run up with Robinhood. It had gone up a lot the last day, and I think that kind of ate into it a little bit. And obviously, crypto had a bit of a dip. I think if crypto was going up and those earnings happened, Coinbase would have ran. So I just think that, that's always a factor. But Square, what's going on there is, some of my developer friends have really put me onto this Goose open source program. And it's agnostic to LLMs. and it's actually helping you produce code and actually, running checks on yours, right? A lot of them will draft code or you'll interact with it, but this is actually meant to be kind of a partner for a developer. And I think that is a very, very interesting product. And I'm kind of going off, what we've been saying for a long time with Meta. A lot of what they were doing with Llama, with PyTorch, we found that very interesting because that gets people into your ecosystem. And so, yeah, I think that's a very, very interesting. I think Goose is an interesting product. There's a lot of scuttlebutt around it. Jack Dorsey, time and time again, he's ahead of the curve. So, irrespective of it, of me actually thinking that this is a good product, it's not a bad bet to bet on, anything that Jack Dorsey's, putting time into. Especially it's kind of like a curve away from their traditional business. So in a way that makes me more confident if it was more, closer to their business. This is an innovation he must feel very, very strongly about.
Jack Dorsey, also known as Satoshi Nakamoto. Have you seen that theory going around?
No.
So I saw it trending yesterday on X, but there was this popular tweet that had a list of like 30 examples of why he's Satoshi Nakamoto. So I think it's just something that's going around right now, but I don't know. I guess would you say it's a non-zero chance or is it a zero chance?
No, it's definitely non-zero. I mean, if you're talking like, it really could be anyone that has, reach in terms of their ability to like secretly hire engineers, right? Which I believe he can. And is it all adjacent to crypto, right? Like if you said Eric Schmidt, like I would say that's possible. And I use that as an example of he's not really like the most like alternative assets like crypto guy, right? But he does have access to engineers. So like engineers that he could, keep to secrecy, right? So really anyone in those two categories, and certain people would do more strongly. But yeah, it's super interesting. I think that's one of the more interesting modern mysteries. One of the things I actually don't know as I was thinking about it, has that wallet moved any crypto? I think it has, right?
In the history, I think so, but I don't think recently at all. Like
because I think there was at one time a rumor that like Satoshi's dead, but I just think there's like a funny aspect of like, I don't like there's got to be like how much. I want to know like what Satoshi's net worth estimate is.
I think it's like hundreds of billions.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the original wallet has a lot of Bitcoin in it.
Yeah, because I mean, what I would say about that is also that it's just like the person has to be pretty rich already, right? Otherwise, can you imagine having like not being that rich and just like leaving hundreds of billions of dollars just like sitting there and not being able to access it?
Well, if that Bitcoin moved, that would kind of ruin the like whole narrative of Bitcoin being, beyond changeable, and it's kind of like viewed as like a commodity versus a lot of these other crypto projects that have teams and people behind them. It's almost like that would kind of really, I feel like, shake up the Bitcoin story if those coins were to ever move.
Yeah, it's one of the interesting. I feel like there's only two like good modern mysteries that I can think of, and one of them is Satoshi, and the other one is Banksy. It would be hilarious if one person was both of those people, but no, I think I think more people know who Banksy is. But it is. That one's even funnier because there's a lot of people that know or say they know Banksy, and that hasn't been revealed. Satoshi, I don't feel like, I don't know. Maybe some people know more about this. I don't feel like many people have been saying Satoshi is like I know them or anything like that. But I don't know much about it. I just don't remember. I definitely know a lot of people are talking about knowing Banksy or through someone, but I haven't really heard that with Satoshi.
You know, the one person who always says he knows Satoshi is Scottie Pippen. I bet you didn't think I was about to say that name, but I don't know why. But if you look at his Twitter thread, he's like always talking about how he knows Satoshi. It's so weird. But
yeah, that is not who I would expect. That is not who I would expect to come out of your mouth, and that's just like, I mean, Scottie Pippen could just want of all the people to say. I mean, but also, I could totally see someone telling Scottie Pippen they were Satoshi to mess with him as well.
Mm-hmm. Bob commented, "I hope the U.S. government owns that pile." Maybe, you know, that's a pretty big pile.
I don't think the U.S. government is competent enough technologically to have pulled that off. But good for them if they did.
I'm sure there's some hackers or engineers or whatever out there somewhere trying to get into that, right? I mean, the pot of gold is crazy. Like, if you would ever be able to hack into that wallet.
Yeah, no, I'm sure there's people constantly trying to hack it.
All right, we have 3 more topics to run through as we only got about 10 minutes, so I'll move us on for this, but I liked that discussion there. If you did as well, be sure to like the stream. We have Intel stock popping up after it came out that Taiwan Semi, Broadcom, and even Qualcomm are interested in some of their different business units. Intel, we've covered it, has just not been able to keep up with the innovation that a lot of these other chip stocks have. Do you think Taiwan Semi or like Broadcom would even be allowed to acquire something like that, being as big as they are already?
I mean, it's kind of weird. I mean, it's kind of weird for the U.S. basically to be like, oh, we want to pass the CHIPS Act and then and make like places like Intel stronger and then sell to Taiwan Semi, right? I feel like especially this administration, that seems like something they would block. But you know, Broadcom, I don't see any reason why they would because Broadcom acquires Intel and they're still like orders of magnitude smaller than Nvidia. So why wouldn't why shouldn't those companies be allowed to blob up to compete with Nvidia? But that's what I'm saying. I could see it for a place like Broadcom, but a foreign buyer of Intel, after they've taken chips money, I just don't see it.
And then we have Apple unveiling a cheaper iPhone 16. It was going to be called the 16e. It's still powerful enough to run AI, but it's going to be retailing at $599, $200 cheaper than their prior cheapest unit. Does this tell you more about the state of Apple and their iPhone business and their growth, or the consumer, and the fact that they have to cheapen the product versus boosting it with services and features?
It's always funny that you hear those real price of those iPhones and you're like, what? But like they wrap it in the cell phone carrier like indentured servitude thing. That's always just like, they're like, oh, you'll only pay this much over this much time, and then it's like, oh, but it's like a free upgrade. It's clever what they do, because you end up paying that like $1,000 or whatever. They just move the accounting around, because like I would literally never go and be like, oh, I need a new iPhone. Here's $1,000. But like they find a way to structure around that problem. So I always thought that was interesting. I don't know if it works that way in other countries. I feel like you might just buy a phone. But as for the actual cheap phone, yes. I mean, I think it does show that they're losing a little of their panache, right? Because their position was always like, we sell a high quality product, right? This is the price. So them kind of slumming it all the way down to like $599 on the price, I think absolutely says that they're feeling the heat. But I also think it's the second part too. Like I think if people were less price sensitive, they wouldn't feel the need to do that, right? I think the phones, the the actual like function of the phone, that's like condensed as well. But yeah, I think it's both. I think the consumer is becoming more, or all three, I should say. The consumer is becoming more discerning. I think the differences in technology are compressing, and I also think Apple is probably more desperate to reach out to customers, get new customers, keep customers because of their innovation problems.
All right. And then lastly, before we turn it over, we have Microsoft unveiling its first quantum computing chip called the Majorana 1. Microsoft shares were red today and it turned green, I believe, probably mostly due to this news. And it's a stock that's kind of traded sideways for the better part of the last year. So are they releasing this at the perfect time to kind of reignite their shares now that they've been kind of just trading sideways for some time? And is this something that you'd be concerned about if you were a company like IonQ or any of the other smaller quantum stocks? I know you mentioned before like Google and the big tech stocks were kind of the best bet in this space.
So breaking news, if you own Palantir, their CEO just sold $1.2 billion in stock and it's tanking. Which, we got out of it this weekend and it had a good day yesterday, but net option sentiment was at 66. So you can own it. There was no reason at the momentum for that. Like, as usual, people got wind. It's 58 now. Let's see where it was at noon before this announcement. 65 at noon. So yeah, sorry, watch out. I wanted to give that just in case you have Palantir. I think I have it in the trading portfolio, but I'll just take care of that in like a few minutes. I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference, but if you have it, you might want to look at selling. I think tomorrow could be rough too. 1.2 billion is that's a big sale. People always say that that's planned, but regardless, it was probably planned because they thought that it was going to be a good time to sell, or that it was, the stock would be doing well. You don't plan to sell if the stock isn't doing well. But anyway, to Microsoft, you never know with these things. Like we talked about, it's always somewhere between the truth of like the quantum computing stocks running on Google News and Jensen Huang like pouring water on it, right? It's always somewhere in the middle. And, Microsoft announcing a quantum chip is very different from the main problem with quantum right now, which is what do you use it for? Like right now, IBM has you can basically apply to run your code on their quantum computer because they don't really know how to use it. And they're just looking for people to help them. So yeah, I think that's a pretty big, important thing there. And like we always kind of say, the truth is somewhere in the middle. I think, them wanting to do it could be for a headline, could be legitimate, could be because they just see people, buying them to test them out. But like I'm saying, I think when they're useful is probably not as long as Jensen Huang was saying, but probably not imminent either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get the vibe that this was kind of like a marketing stunt almost. Mario is saying in the comments that they've been working on this for 20 plus years and they acknowledge that it's not ready for to hit the market as a product yet. So
yeah, they could be reaching. They made this big OpenAI acquisition, and I think they probably expected that to make them dominant. And they might be questioning it a bit, right? They might be questioning it a little bit. Their compute is very expensive, and I think they were kind of happy to pay that compute to win AI or whatever. But you have you now have things like DeepSeek coming, right? And who knows what's more? And I think they were going to try to put ChatGPT into Bing, right, or into their search engine. And then you also have places like Perplexity that are kind of taking LLMs and making them more usable than Microsoft is in terms of a product. right? So I think they're probably like they're probably overall still, you know, happy that they made that acquisition, but I don't think it played out like I don't think it's playing out like they would have hoped it would.
That's an interesting point. We got a question about Chipotle. I don't know if you want to answer it now or on the other side. No,
what's going on with Chipotle?
They're just asking. David's asking. The stock is down 9% year to date. What's going on with it? He knows the CEO left for Starbucks, but I guess why is it performing so poorly? Is the gist.
Let's see. Oh wow. I mean, it looks terrible in the signals. I mean, I think the gist is, you know, there was a lot of faith in that CEO. It was creating a lot of institutional bets. The CEO left, and it seems to have turned. You know, I think they might be, you know, there's a stock really trades on management, and Starbucks has been doing better since he switched. But I do think that's probably too big of a gap. But like I'm saying, I mean, some of that could be consumer cyclical, like souring a little bit, but you know, you could never underestimate the power of a CEO. Never downplay that. All right, switch.
Yep, we'll see you on the other side. Everybody stick here with me. We'll be right back with George, and we'll be doing the model portfolio update. For those of you watching and got that Palantir update, the stock is now down over 12%. It's at $109 currently on the day. So that breaking news of the CEO, Alex Karp, selling shares, hitting the stock hard right now. See if we only have 13 minutes left in the trading day. We'll see if there's any kind of bottom found for the day at least. But as of right now, it doesn't look that way. We checked in Prospero at the beginning of the stream at the QQQ and the SPY net option sentiment. So let's check back in and see if there are any changes. Okay, so the QQQ went up a little bit. It is at 40 now in net options sentiment, and the SPY is at 21. So a bit of a separation between the QQQ and the SPY now, with the QQQ being so much higher. So they continue flip-flopping back and forth, but it looks like the QQQ is kind of pulling away at the moment. Maybe some more faith in tech at this current time than there has been in recent weeks and so far this year. Thank you for everybody who tuned into the stream today. Sorry we missed Monday. Hopefully you enjoyed your day off, everyone, away from the market. If you're new and haven't seen this before, we're going to make live updates right now to the model portfolio. So keep watching. It'll be worth it. All right. I don't think. No. Okay.
Can you see?
We couldn't hear you, George, but now we can.
Oh. So first I wanted to show these. Right? This is AppLovin, what I was mentioning first. And it's like really cool because you can see like net options, you know, net options and upside breakout being lower here. And then, like I said, when they both got to around 90, that's when it got picked up on our screener. And then look at these, you know, big jumps. And what's cool is you can even see this net option sentiment run up, this little one, and this upside breakup run up into that event. And even for this, you can see the same thing. Net option sentiment running up before this little, hitch. And here's, this is SMCI. I didn't. And then this is, I have to move it. I think this is around where we entered. I'd have to look. But yeah, similar things. You see all this, like you see net option sentiment running up a little bit. And we weren't involved in this, even though it did. But this was a nice little run up where you started to see net option sentiment go from 40 all the way up here. And then, upside really started to rise before this. And then you have kind of an even bigger run of net option sentiment before this recent thing. So it's some cool analysis that we've been doing. This is going to be in the newsletter tomorrow. But wanted to show you guys, see if you had any questions, comments on these, cool new case studies we're doing for some good pickups. And then, yeah, let's get to this. What's QQQ SPY?
So QQQ is 40 and the SPY is 21.
Did this the wrong order. All right, what do we have?
Materials took a sharp turn down and healthcare is going the other way. Energy looks the strongest right now, so we will make sure to have a bull pick for it.
Oh. All right. Oops, sorry. Okay. Look, some of our like yeah, there we go. I thought I had it. Like Dell, like a lot of the ones that had been down, like Dell, Micron, we've been shorting recently. They're coming back. That's a nice difference between like momentum score and the other scores. It does really isolate where we're seeing changes.
I actually wanted to ask you about that. So, like, for a stock to show up in the momentum score one way or the other, like day after day, it needs to improve that much more from its prior day's signals, or there.
Not necessarily like improve, because some of it is raw score. I mean, it at least needs to hold ground to stay there. But if it just holds ground, it's probably going to be passed by something else.
Mm-hmm.
Is the best way to say that. Oh, Taiwan sending back down. All over the place. It just can't make up its mind. Okay. Big Bear AI getting creamed. Oops. Okay, what do we got? Verify that I have this right. What is GPI? What company is that? It's like, I don't know. There's our energy pick. All right.
Group 1 Automotive is GPI.
Oh my God, I covered that company like a very long time ago. That's funny. Back in Xerox. Home Depot. I think that's good. Sometimes that doesn't taste right. I don't know what goes on there. All right. That's done. Damn, the market really had a tough close.
Maybe Palantir spooked the market.
Yeah, I'm just checking this with everybody around. Might be time to get rid of a coin, but it's still above 50, so I'm gonna keep. Any movements here? No, I can keep all of that, and then I'm just gonna add TSM. All right, I think that's all. Unless anyone has any questions.
Don't see anything as of now. Thank you all for tuning in and those who made it to the final minute here. But we will be back on a normal schedule next week. So Monday, 11 a.m. We should be back live. So see everybody then. Bye, everyone.